The Second Wave of Feminism by Adrienne de Guzman. Here is a little bit of background information about Betty Friedan before starting. Betty Friedan is remembered as one of the many early leaders and leading voices of the feminist and women's rights movement of the 20th century. She was born on February 4, 1921, with parents Miriam Horowitz Goldstein and Harry Goldstein. As a child, Friedan had a difficult relationship with her mother, which she later attributed to her mother's frustration and resentment about not pursuing a career outside the home. She excelled at Smith College and later graduated in 1942 with a bachelor's degree. She acquired a fellowship to study at the University of California, but instead she chose to go to New York City to work as a reporter. She got married in 1947 to Carl Friedan and had 3 children. She had returned to being a reporter after her first child was born, but then, unfortunately, lost her job while she was pregnant with her second child. Friedan then stayed home to take care of her family. Unfortunately, she dies of heart failure on February 4, 2006, in Washington, D.C. Here is some background information on the book. This book was published on February 19, 1963. The reason for the publication of this book is because after losing her job, she had to stay home and care for her family. She was very uneasy as a housewife, and suddenly began to wonder if other women had felt the same way she was feeling. She wanted to find some answers to her question, so she surveyed other graduates of Smith College, and the results formatted the basis of the feminine mystique. Why did she publish it? On page 107 of the Feminine Mystique, it says, quote-unquote, the feminists had destroyed the old image, but they could not erase the hostility, the prejudice, the discrimination that remained. She published this book to narrate the presumptions that women obtain satisfaction and contentment through domestic work, sexual lives, marriage, and their children. What has made this book a world classic? This book in general gave a huge impact as it encouraged women to seek new opportunities for themselves and speak about feminist protests and the boredom of the traditional suburban housewife role. This book also helped launch the modern women's feminist movement. A quote from another book, White Feminism, from the suffragettes to influencers and who they leave behind. The feminist revolution had to be fought because women quite simply were stopped at a state of evolution far short of their human capacity. Friedan 7. They wanted to prove that women were malcontent and felt that women were not able to voice how they felt. Why and how has this piece of literature been influential? Just in our luck, this had stimulated the new wave, or also known as the second wave of feminism. This wave assisted women across the country to begin working cooperatively across the country. In the book, quote-unquote, the only way for a woman as for a man to find herself, to know herself as a person, is by creative work of her own. Friedan 472. By wanting just a small amount of change, they knew they had to work together for that change just to take place. This gave a language and a voice to the frustrations the women were feeling in the early 50s and 60s. Does it still stand the test of time? This piece of literature is still relevant when it comes to our comprehension of women and domesticity. An article of NPR's states, there's some argument to make that circumscribed world that Betty Friedan was describing. I wouldn't say it made women happier, but it made one at least know what one's place was in the world and not have the sense that everything was up for grabs and you had to be good in every single sphere, like taking care of the home, taking care of the children, working your job, and being ambitious. Unfortunately, there are still some issues that do not have solutions to our modern society. But there has been some progress after this piece of literature was published. For example, having the very first female vice president elected and having more opportunities for women in working fields. What criticism has been made of the work? There had been a handful amount of criticism for this piece. After publishing the book, it encountered a lot of repercussions against the subject of feminism. With that being said, some women had some things in their mind, feeling inferred from the piece of literature that wives and mothers could never be at ease. This book was said to be racist and classist. Quote unquote, the problem that has no name expresses the environment and conditions of women in the society, referred to the select group of college-educated, middle and upper class, and married white women with children. According to Hooks, Friedan had written myopically, as though women of other races and classes, those who, she argued, were most victimized by sexist oppression, simply did not exist. As stated on page 78 of the book, we can no longer ignore that voice within woman that says, I want something more than my husband and my children and my house. She did not discuss who would be called in to look after the children and preserve the home if more women like herself were freed from the house labor and given equal access with white women to the professions. However, she ignored the existence of all non-white women and poor white women. Another tough criticism this book had received was that it was found on a numerous amount of lies. Friedan had claimed that she, quote-unquote, came to political consciousness out of a delusionment with her life as a suburban housewife. And in doing so, she promoted the feminine mystique by marketing its authenticity. But Betty Friedan was not a simple housewife, driven to action by her feelings of domestic constraint. Her story made it achievable for white suburban women readers to recognize its author and thereby magnified the book's appeal. So what made Betty Friedan an influential feminist? She became a force for change and co-founded the National Organization for Women, also known as NOW, in 1966. She fought for abortion rights by establishing the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws, now known as the NARAL, Pro-Choice America, in 1969. Betty wanted more women to have a greater role in the political process. So, she assisted in creating the National Women's Political Caucus in 1971, as well as published The Second Stage, which sought to help women wrestling with the demands of work and home. Here are all the links of all the pictures that I used in this presentation.